Oh, there goes my target. Off to the ether. Hey guys, Brass Facts here. Today we're going to be looking at the 1X GLx Micro Prism Cyclops from Primary Arms. I think I got that slightly out of order, but I think you get the idea. I think most of you are probably already familiar with the Micro Prism lineup from Primary Arms, but a quick rundown for those that are not. It's this little tumorous looking thing that is still a scope, it's a prism, but of the 1X variety. That is, all it can do is 1X. I think you're already beginning to understand the reason why this video is titled the way it is. And that's because that, at least on the surface and maybe below the surface, is a very weird combination of features. It's a scope, but it doesn't have magnification. It is 1X only. So outside of astigmatism, who exactly is this scope for? And that and more is going to be the objective of today's video.
Oh, okay, almost forgot. I haven't got a free thing in like 6 months, so yeah, completely just forgot to do this. Primary Arms sent me this device with the expectation of a review. So, disclaimers on the table, what's up, the usual. Alright, let's give a quick rundown of this dude so we're all on the same page. About 8.7, 8.8 ounces depending on which mount you use, so a hair on the heavy side compared to other 1X options on the market, but absolutely nothing egregious. Instead of Primary Arms fashion, it comes with the whole suite of mounts, though we will double back on this. There unfortunately does not seem to be any major changes from the SLX lineup mounting material to the design itself. Zeroing is accomplished via these exposed kind of flat turrets. I marked mine and observed no zero shift, or at least movement, from these turrets. These are fortunately now 1/2 MOA adjustments instead of the 1 MOA that the original SLX lineup had. Glass quality is perfectly usable at 1X, though honestly impossible to tell any difference over the SLX variant. However, when we add the demands of magnified usage, I found the GLX 1X struggled a little bit. The resolution and sharpness were okay, but the overall image was hazy with noticeable tint, which was especially bad when viewing stuff at low angle lighting or observing glare through the optic. Like, it really just kind of fucked its day up, for the lack of a better term. Very similar performance to budget red dots like the SIG or lower end T2 Hulsun, 4.3 types. Reticle's the same old we've come to expect. They've been using this for a notable number of years now. We got a huge old horseshoe for bulk aiming and then a chevron for our actual aiming point. We have a small auto ranging component underneath, it works just fine. Though if I can throw a bit of personal interjection here, the chevron is just a bit too bulky for my taste, both up close and out far. In practice, the outer ring is just never really all that useful outside of CQB and could be shrunk a fair bit more and still retain that usability. And the chevron itself is just huge and reminds me a lot of the RMR dual illumination reticle or the TR24, where you kind of just treat it as this bulk aiming solution more so than a very fine aiming point. This further extends to magnified usage, where the chevron is just so damn thick, and it's hard to see between the legs when you're shooting at a smaller target, and you need to use the kind of gap between the legs as your aiming point as you go further out, say 200, 300 yards. I get that these things are marketed towards people with shit vision, and it needs to be very visible at the 1X, but I think there's a little bit of tinkering that can be done here to kind of push it towards perfection. Jitterbug the reticle is a bit silly in my opinion, or at least offer a different version. Some upsides here: this device absolutely achieves daylight bright illumination, and almost, but not quite, verges on red dot bright performance. It's certainly bright enough to offer a ton of fluorescing contrast in low lighting conditions, and it can absolutely hang and continue to provide contrast when you're using your Gorgillion Candela white light against a white wall 1 foot away. On top of that, unlike LPVOs, this has a very impressive battery life, both inherently due to being a prism and doing this pretty well, but also because it's got an auto off, auto on built in. Really good here. This is one of those things where you're just going to set it to a useful brightness level, and then you're just never going to touch the brightness button again, which is cool because they've recessed the brightness buttons to kind of just be out of the way, which is nice, right? The form factor of the GLX is much nicer. And all of this can be had for about $300.
Now, back to the question at the start of the video. Who exactly is this Micro Prism for? I think that question is easier answered by asking, in what scenarios would you pick this Micro Prism, this Primary Arms GLx 1X Micro Prism ACSS Cyclops from primaryarms.com, affiliate link down below. When would you pick that over a red dot at, or very often, cheaper price than this device? Now, obviously, right out of the get-go, the answer is astigmatism, and by God, society's gene pool is going to shit there are a good chunk of people with astigmatism, some of which is going to be bad enough that you have to use something with an etched reticle. The answer to that question, that's going to be up to you. If you already know if your astigmatism is bad enough for your threshold of tolerance that you can't use a red dot, and in that case, here you go, 1x micro prism. But I think the more interesting question is, because that is a relatively small niche of people, for everyone else that has minor astigmatism or even no astigmatism at all, where'd my dot go? In what scenario does the micro prism outperform the red dot? There's actually nothing in here. Welcome to showbiz. This video is sponsored by Venture Surplus. Today we're going to be talking about bottles, canteens, whatever you want to call it. I think most of you probably already have, at least I do, a shitload of Nalgene bottles. And those are really nice, indestructible, can be used as a blunt force weapon. You can freeze them, you can even boil water in them if you're really desperate. Number of downsides though. If you want to attach it to the outside of your body, they're incredibly bulky for what they are, right? They're cylindrical, so they're kind of a pain in the ass in that regard. What's up? Welcome to the canteen. Well, now we're talking, because now we can use standard canteen pouches on the outside of our gear, and it's not nearly as bulky, and it actually conforms slightly to your body. And that's more or less it. Yeah, you can check these, you can buy these on Venture Surplus if you want. I mean, if you've already got a million Nalgenes, I wouldn't buy more plastic shit to put in your bags. But if you're looking for more, as seemingly always seems to be the case, as you lose them, your friends take them, or you leave them at the campsite, and you need more bottles, well, go check out Venture Surplus. They got the canteens, and they got these larger quart style ones. Back to the video.
So yeah, this thing is often touted as having red dot-like infinite eye relief. And in theory, yeah, you can mount it anywhere, and within reason, you can see the reticle. So you do get that advantage over an LPVO, and your head placement is basically irrelevant in terms of left, right, up, and down. So once again, another win there. But the distance from your eye, or the eye relief, does in fact heavily influence the quality of the 1X image, such that in practice, you'll actually just be mounting this as close to your face as possible. Even if you mount it directly touching your eyeball, the best position I think image-wise, you're still gonna get what I would consider a mid-tier 1X on an LPVO. It's very nice and flat, but you can tell it is definitely not 1X, it's less than 1X. Let's touch on night vision passive performance for just a second here. It's a mixed bag, but generally speaking, not something you really want to go all in on. The device itself sort of works under night vision, especially in brighter conditions, so we're talking full moonlit night, near or within a city such that, the backlighting is enough to create enough ambient lighting. There's just enough passive performance there, enough light transmission that it can be used. However, in more serious environments, darker environments, indoors, you will quickly find that this device has a number of issues, namely, the light transmission isn't really at that higher tier that you can begin to expect as you cross the $300, $400, $500 threshold. More importantly, however, the device simply just does not get dim enough for these darker environments. Perhaps most importantly, though, because this is an optic at the end of the day, the optic needs to be focused to your night vision device, or your night vision device needs to be focused to your optic. I think very few people are going to want to focus the night vision device to the optic because that essentially blinds you, especially in the context of a monocular usage. A little better in a binocular usage. And if you focus the optic to your night vision device, well, that certainly works, but you give up the very common desire of having your optic be an emergency white light backup to night vision, right? That's a very common SOP. So yeah, this thing can work in a pinch, but to me, it's very much a last resort type of passive aiming solution instead of something that you'll regularly want to use. What about the durability? How does this thing hold up? We now have 3 years of anecdotes with Primary Arms Prism sights, and we can certainly say the actual Prism sight, pretty dang durable. But the mounts that they come with, especially the cantilevers, they are pretty lackluster. And thus, the GLx 1X falls in the exact same camp as the other budget 1X solution. Good optics, you're probably going to want to replace that mount if you're going to take it to the metaphorical hell and back. Good thing this thing is compatible with ACOG mini mounts. As for recoil-wise, for anyone that gives a shit, I've had this for about 700 rounds on an AK the entire time, and I didn't notice any zero shift issues, so good to go there, I guess. So yeah, ultimately we can treat this like a red dot, we can use it like a red dot, but don't let that fool you. This does not perform at the same tier as a red dot. But there are some notable upsides we are getting for this non-red dot-like performance, because it's not a red dot at the end of the day. I think the biggest one is the simplistic nature of this thing. When I use a red dot, my brightness requirement indoors, outdoors, and everything in between is completely variable, which means most of the time I just set it to be, on average, a hair too bright and then just deal with it, because I'd rather have too bright than way too dim and the reticle being essentially invisible to me. While an etched reticle on average is going to be less punchy and less defined, it is always visible in daylight settings. And for nighttime settings, the illumination, which we can actually just leave on here due to the great battery life, will kick in to provide just enough contrast against, say, a flashlight. I set this thing to about 2 off the top in terms of brightness, and never needed to touch the brightness setting once during the rest of the review, or switch the battery for that matter. I think we often forget how often we have redos on pistols or rifle drills when we realize a dot is set too bright or too dim. This happens a surprising amount of time in practice, even with a lot of very competent shooters. And that is indicative of sort of an issue with the red dots that we kind of gloss over a lot of times. Sometimes the thing's too bright, sometimes the thing's too dim. With a prism, you're not really going to run into that issue. This is especially noticeable, I think, when we use magnifiers. The correct brightness on a red dot sight for 1x is very often way too bright and blooms out a magnifier, and you're going to need to dial it way down to use the magnifier to a brightness level such the dot ceases to bloom, and then very often, if you want some level of precision, becomes translucent. We notice none of that here. You flip the magnifier over and it's always ready to cook.
Well, I think that more or less covers it. There obviously is a niche for this product. If you want those upsides that I mentioned, well, this is for you. So generally speaking, I think this is kind of a magnifier-centric design, or obviously, as mentioned, someone that has astigmatism. But you don't quite want to make the jump for either durability reasons, size reasons, bulk reasons, cost reasons, over to the land of the LPVO. This is obviously my opinion, of course. Every video I make is my opinion. That's how the internet works. But for some reason I still have, okay, whatever. On my opinion, would I keep this? Would I buy this? Would I put this on a rifle that I really want to depend on? Not really, right? If someone hands me this, I'm not gonna be like, oh, well, I'm killed in the sheets. Might as well put a bullet in my brains. No, it's not that bad. But personally for me, if I'm going to deal with the downsides of a optic, I want some major upsides, and slightly better magnifier performance ain't it. I'd rather just run an LPVO, I'd rather run a Micro Prism magnified from this brand, or I would run an ACOG, right? All right, well, that's the video. Bon voyage. I guess I'll put an affiliate link down below or in my link tree, because I think YouTube will try to kill me if I directly link to a gun website. So if you want to support me and buy this guy, you can use my affiliate link down below. Although I think most people would consider this leaning towards negative on the review side of things, so probably no one's going to buy it. But I'll put it down there regardless. I guess if you want, whatever. I think that's it, right? All right, that's it. I'm going to put a red dot back on this gun now. Here comes the girl. Hello, girl. Welcome.
And she don't stop coming, and she don't stop
Oh my god, damn it, ruining it.
coming, and they don't stop 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 coming.